Thank you for tuning in, everybody. This is Smitty Smith, and I'm bringing you a special little update today. Activision's own One of Swords, their social media manager, Dan Amrich, recently released a book entitled Critical Path: How to Review Video Games for a Living. The book discusses what it takes to actually review games, how difficult it is, and all of the steps that are actually involved. It's not just playing games. But the book does a great job of explaining what you can expect if you're looking to get into this field. Dan has been with outlets such as let's see, official Xbox magazine. Like I said, he's now working for Activision. He's done a lot of things both in and outside of the video game world in terms of writing and being a professional writer. I would say go pick the book up. I've purchased it myself and it's quite good. You can get it on Kindle for $9.99, or you can get a paperback version for $17.99. I'll go ahead and put a link in the description. But Dan was kind enough to sit down with the Xbox 360 Solocast, which is my podcast, in November 2011. The interview actually plays out somewhat similar to what a Cliff's Notes version of his book is. Here is that interview. Enjoy. Joining me today is Activision's own One of Swords, Dan Amrich. Thanks for taking time to talk to me here today, Dan.
Happy to be here, Smitty.
Thank you, thank you.
Now, I know everybody their gamer tags. I don't know anybody's real names. It's not worth it. Joshua, who's true. Joshua doesn't matter. It's
I prefer to go by Smitty anyway. So, I know a little bit about your past, working with OXM, GamePro, and Games Radar. Care to talk about some of the things that you've done in order to get where you are today?
Well, there was the Virgin Sacrifice, and there was the Pact with Satan.
I thought we weren't supposed to talk about that.
Oh no, those are fine. Any lawsuits I'm personally involved in are fine.
Okay.
Yeah, I just I started writing when I was I started writing seriously when I was in college. I always liked language and stuff, so I didn't expect to turn into a writer. But I found myself as a writer kind of senior year of college. I had a writing minor. I mean, I was interested enough in it to be a writing minor in college, but my major was television radio. And podcasting is about all I do with that now. But my senior year, I took a class called Writing as a Critic, and I had to review everything from books and music all the way to art and theater. And nothing is more difficult in my world than having to review art. Like to go to an art gallery and say, here's what it is. So it turned out, I was focusing on music at the time. And by the time I was out of that class, I started to get published in local papers and, pitch myself around and stuff. So when I got my first full-time job as a music journalist guy, on the side, I started doing game reviews, and that's what wound up taking off, much to everyone's surprise. Like my college professor was like, you should go to Rolling Stone and blah, blah, blah. She was very supportive. And when she found out that I went into reviewing video games, she was kind of like, oh, yeah, they're toys. She actually said at one point, they're toys. Why would you spend your life doing toys? I mean, they're fads. They're going to go away. And she was thinking, of the Atari crash in the 80s. And
who's laughing now?
Well, yeah, kind of who's laughing now. She has since said, okay, I guess you were right, because this was in the mid-90s, and I said, it doesn't matter what console wins the console wars, there's always going to be electronic entertainment. Like the PC has been stable all this time. It looks like it's going to continue to be stable. And what's more, who knows, maybe in 15, 20 years, there's going to be like a little handheld device that plays games. It's also my phone. I don't know, So, yeah.
So you're also a psychic.
I'm also slightly psychic, yes.
That's good.
Actually, it's more like Back to the Future. I went into the future and I found out what was there, and then I brought it back and I said, hey guys, I have an idea. And then, that's how we invented the iPhone.
Invest in games, stay away from stocks.
Yeah, exactly. I have a copy of that Bandai Fitness NES game sealed because I know how much it's going to be worth. Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Now, you're now the social media manager at Activision. Can you explain exactly what it is you do there?
I really wish I could. It's funny. I've been thinking about that title. When I came on, I was editor-in-chief of the World of Warcraft magazine at Future right after when I left OXM. I left OXM because I was finally going to be editor-in-chief of something, and that was a career goal for me. I had been in the industry for about 15 years, and I had been a senior editor for at least 10 of them. I had just never gotten much higher. And Activision called me the week that I moved over from OXM to the WoW magazine to say, we have this thing, we're creating this position, I want to talk to you and see if you'd be something you'd like to talk to us about. And when it all shook down, I had actually asked, can I just be editor-in-chief? You know, because like that's the title I know how to be, and that's the title I had wanted. And they're like, no, we really, I mean, you know, you're going to be in charge of some other social media stuff, and you know, we need you to, we're going to need your advice on how the, you know, other people can use it. And so social media manager, like we want to make you a manager so you feel important. But I'm like, but I'm comfortable being community manager. That's okay, you know, because
awesome.
Ultimately that's what I do. I am a community manager, but instead of doing it for just you know, a developer or a smaller publisher, I'm doing it for all of Activision on a corporate level. So honestly, I think of myself as the blogger or the community manager. Social media manager just means if you have a question about Twitter, Dan can tell you what a hashtag is. I mean, and
Awesome.
some of what I do is that. Like, I have some questions about social media, and I'm like, oh, sure, yeah, I'll swing by my office, or I'll come to you. And it's always like, you know, so what's the difference between an @ and a hashtag? And I'm like, okay, well, let me explain, you know, and I don't have any problem explaining that because you got to find out somehow. But, you know, there's still a lot of people that don't live and breathe Twitter the way that a lot of gamers do.
Sure. So the title is more for internally than Activision?
Yeah, I mean, my business card says it, and I wish it didn't. I've actually thought that maybe at the end of this year, you know, I'll have my end of the year review, and maybe I could ask if I could have my title changed or something. Because
Horse Whisperer?
Well, yeah, Horse Whisperer. I don't know. Yeah, Troll Whisperer, I think, would probably be the best thing. But, you know, I feel very comfortable and no shame in being community manager, but I think that title doesn't make sense when you're at a giant company like Activision, and I'm not like the Skylanders community manager or the Call of Duty community manager. I'm the Activision community manager, and I think that everybody was kind of like, well, let's see. Major Nelson is what it was based on very, very closely, in the same way that he's like the community guy. He's the guy, you know,
yeah.
at Microsoft. I'm the guy you're supposed to know at Activision. And I've said that to Major Nelson himself. I'm like, my job is like a version of yours that they let me remix as I wanted to see fit. So,
and Larry's a great guy, and you are too. You know, I think both of you have been put in perfect positions for what you do. So.
I thank you. I didn't believe it until around E3 of this year. The first 18 months were very, very difficult for me, figuring out exactly what I was supposed to be doing, how I was supposed to be behaving, what I could say could wind up being a headline in media outlets where I used to work. That was kind of surreal, you know, seeing my quotes in other people's news stories when I'm like, I used to go to junkets with you. You know, what do you do? Why are you reporting on me?
Yeah. And you know, that's a good point. Is you know, I'm an aspiring games journalist myself, and sometimes I go on these little tangents on Twitter, and I know just one of these days one of them's going to come back and bite me in the butt. So
very possibly, yeah.
To some of these people out there that want to get into the industry, they really need to understand that with social media, everything can be looked at. So you need to handle yourself professionally.
Can I give you a concrete example of something that happened when I was at Games Radar that is exactly this?
I'd love you to.
I was employee number 2 at Radar. There was the editorial director, and then there was me, because my other project at Future had gotten shut down, and they didn't want me to leave the company.
Sure.
So I applied to be at Radar, and they said, yeah, that's a good fit. So part of my job was to help screen the new candidates, and they had asked for resumes long before they actually got a chance to get through them, like 6 weeks. Like, if you apply for a job and then you don't hear back from them for 6 weeks, you assume you didn't get that job, right? So one of the people that we found was a good writer. Like, his writing samples were very good, and he kept a blog. And so, you know, my job at that point was see what you can find out, see what else they've written, because, you know, if you send in your writing samples, we know that's the best you can possibly write.
Absolutely.
You want to see what the worst that they can write, what their natural voice is. And if you want to try to figure out, are they going to be a good personality fit for what we're trying to build? So I found this guy's blog. It was under his real name. He wasn't hiding anything. I saw some of his forum posts, and he, had a lot of things in there about how he wanted to get in this industry more, and he wanted to change things because he thought that we could aspire to something better, and it's kind of saying all the right stuff. And he was local, and so he was somebody that we could, hire. And then when we called him back, HR said, okay, you've got an appointment. I checked his blog the next day, and it was one of the nastiest blog posts I'd ever seen.
Really?
He had said, well, it's clear that they finally figured out what the hell they're doing over there, and they wouldn't have called me unless they wanted my expertise, and I'm going to show them how wrong they were to make me wait this long. And I've read their magazines and they're piss poor. Obviously, they need help making them. This is how I'm going to fix things. And it was just nothing but arrogance.
Yeah.
And I showed it to my boss, and I was like, dude, you should just be ready for this guy when he comes in. And he looked at it, he goes, oh, he's not coming in.
Yep.
And they canceled his interview.
That's what happened.
And like, it was just because of what you put out there. It totally does. People do look at Facebook. They do look at Twitter and your blogs. And if there's something to be said by standing by what you believe in and speaking your mind, but you also have to be willing to defend what you say, and you have to be willing to accept the the problems that come with being brutally honest with the internet, because you never know who's reading.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Absolutely right. It's too bad for him. It sounds like
it really was.
Could have been a good writer, but shot himself in the foot.
He may still, he may have gone and has since gotten older or wiser or more experienced or whatever. But at the time, yeah, it would have been his golden ticket. I mean, to be one of the launch guys at Games Radar, all those guys have done very well in terms of job satisfaction and mini internet fame,
I'm very jealous, for one. Okay. Now, you're largely successful in both the world of gaming and out of it. I know you did a lot with music and things like that. I know you didn't land, these jobs simply because you like to play games. Can you give us a little bit of background on what you were like as a teenager, what you did in college, and how you got to where you are now?
Yeah. And thank you for asking, because nobody has. Nobody's asked me that question before. It isn't just rescuing the princess. We got a hilarious letter from some kid that was reading our magazine in the early 90s. It was called Flux. And he wrote in because he found an error in the magazine, and he included his resume, kind of the same thing. Like, I'm going to tell you how to make a better magazine. You should hire me. I'll fix this for you. And his resume was actually just his game playing experience. Like, it literally listed, like, beat Super Punch-Out in 3 hours, and played and mastered every game ever created for the Nintendo Entertainment System. And
I wish that worked.
Right, like, that's the thing. Like, being awesome at games, saving the princess, does not actually translate to your resume. Like, that's not what you need to do. It's more about your writing skill, your ability to communicate with people. Whether you want to do social media or whether you want to do journalism, you have to be able to explain yourself and express yourself clearly and accurately, and most of all, briefly now, because when it comes to a Facebook post or a Twitter thing, you have to get it all in one shot.
Sure.
But growing up, I was absolutely your stereotypical awkward nerd. My grandmother gave me a quarter every time I would go to see her, and that quarter would always go into arcade machines. I basically grew up in arcades. So, I remember when Pac-Man was new. I remember going, what's that game? When I was 10 years old. My dad was a computer programmer for McGraw-Hill, the big textbook publisher. So I grew up around computers, and I understood, that I was never afraid of computers. He used to work on those giant tape reel machines, the Honeywell tape readers that you see in like the old Disney Dexter Riley movies and stuff, you know?
Card punches and things.
Yeah, I swear to God, I visited my parents a couple months ago, and I found a box of IBM punch cards in the garage that my dad was like, well, I use those for note paper. And I'm like, Dad, these are 30 years old, But so I grew up, being a computer gamer and being a fan of video games, but never having the math skills to create them. And when in high school, I just found out I was more of a verbal person than I was a math person. SAT scores made that absolutely clear. And, I hung out with my friends. I played Dungeons and Dragons. Our idea of fun was going to the arcade. I actually had my bachelor party at Dave & Buster's in Philadelphia.
Awesome.
It was like, I said, don't get me anything skanky. That's not really my scene. The only thing that was wrong was that I was marrying somebody who was a gamer, and she was so bummed that she couldn't go to my bachelor party. And I was like, well, if I was throwing it, I would have invited you, So yeah, I mean, I grew up as a stereotypical nerd. I memorized Monty Python stuff. I have every album Weird Al's ever done.
That's awesome. We have a lot in common.
Yeah, I mean, like my story is probably all too common, and I can still to this day, like if you want me to recite Back to the Future or Ghostbusters or This Is Spinal Tap, I can do that from memory. I grew up watching a lot of movies and stuff like that. The one thing is that I didn't get into comics until I was an adult. My mom did not like comic books. She thought that they were violent, and she had a real anti-violence thing, which, being on the Call of Duty franchise now, probably, yeah, hey, Mom, Prototype 2 is going to be awesome. Wait till you see it. But I didn't get into comics until college and late high school. My friends got me into like the DC Vertigo stuff that was going on late 80s, early 90s. So Watchmen and Sandman, those are my touchstones. And I've since, filled in a lot of my comic knowledge. And I still do kind of prefer DC, which was a bit of a problem for some of the people here who operate the Marvel games. They were like, how dare you talk about Batman? How dare you talk about Watchmen? I'm like, well, look, it's not like there's ever going to be a Watchmen game. Oh my God! And then I wish there wasn't. So.
Yeah. Well, that is the animal that is video games.
Yeah, basically.
It's a roller coaster.
Yeah, that's my thing. And I grew up doing a lot of musical theater too. That's where the music comes in. As I sang at an early age. I actually had opera training.
I was just going to say that you have some opera training. Yeah, if I get a chance to meet you at PAX East this year, I am certainly going to try to call you on that.
Well, my parlor trick for having useless, everybody has a skill that they just never use again, right?
Sure.
Like maybe you're awesome with numbers, but you hate accounting, or you took piano lessons for 8 years and then you hated it, but like you can still sit down and you can play something for friends. And they'd be like, I had no idea. I can hit that high note in Bohemian Rhapsody legitimately.
Really?
Yeah, and I 3 times now at PAX I have not had the opportunity to show off.
Oh, don't you worry. I will find you. I will track you down.
The closest I got up on a Rock Band stage, and the guy before me had butchered Bohemian Rhapsody, so they were like, "We're not listening to that song again."
Oh,
like, all right, well, that was why I was waiting in line. Like I was like, I can put this back where it should be, and they're like, no. So. Yeah, I then got out of theater and then picked up guitar because I thought it would get me girls, and then it didn't, but I fell in love with the guitar, so that worked out.
It didn't. You're doing it wrong.
Yeah, I know. I totally was doing it wrong. I met my wife because she asked me, and this is absolutely a giant ray of hope for nerds. She asked me to teach her how to juggle because I was a juggler.
Oh,
and
awesome.
I juggle fire. That's my thing.
Good God.
Yeah, it's fun.
I'm not even allowed to be near fire.
Yeah, my mom wasn't thrilled when I picked up fire juggling in high school. She was a little terrified. She's like, are you sure? I'm like, Mom, they're just like clubs on fire. I've been doing clubs for a good 4 or 5 months now. I'm sure I'm fine and ready for fire.
Famous last words. Mom, watch this.
Yeah, watch this.
Yep.
But yeah, that's so that is hope. If you're awkward and you've turned to something bizarre like juggling or unicycling or other circus skills that you as a geek think are fun that nobody else thinks are fun, somebody out there will eventually appreciate you for those skills. That's okay.
Excellent. Now, you're at Activision. Activision is this huge publisher, and Modern Warfare 3 has just become the biggest media release in history, both in 24 hours and in a 5-day span. What's it like working there when something this big happens?
Chaotic.
Yeah.
It's funny because the first year that I was here, I started in January 2010, so I'm just coming up on my second year. I was here for the Black Ops launch, but Black Ops planning and stuff had already happened, and I had been added to the situation later. So, I got to see some of it, but I didn't really feel a lot of ownership in it. This time, knowing that Modern 3 was coming, I was in some of the meetings when they're talking about this is what's going to happen, this is what we're thinking is going to happen, and it's been really exciting. And I realized, when the game came out, they gave everybody in the building a special Modern Warfare 3 T-shirt that has our building address on the sleeve. We're at 3100 Ocean Park Boulevard, and it says 3100 Squad. And I realized, my God, I'm so proud that I have that, because I can actually say I was here for that. This one, whatever little stuff I've done to help get the word out or clarify things or whatever it is that they need me to do, I do feel a little bit of ownership. It was insane, though, because for the weeks between the game going gold and being released to manufacturing and the release date, that's when everybody goes crazy thinking, are people going to steal it from the warehouse? Are people going to sell it early, which they did? Mm-hmm. So being in the loop on all of the stuff where they're trying to stop leaks from getting out, both, there were some major spoilers. I actually found out about game spoilers. I have not finished Modern Warfare 3 yet on the single-player campaign. I just haven't had the time. And I found out some of the spoilers of the first-person campaign because people had posted them on YouTube, and I was part of the crew that was trying to find the people and shut them down
Oh,
so
that's
that they
too bad.
wouldn't ruin the game. So talk about your occupational hazards. You know, it's not as bad as like smoke inhalation for a firefighter or you know, getting sick if you're a doctor, but man, it killed me that I was like, I was looking forward to this game as much as everybody else was, but unfortunately my position gave me access that I didn't want.
Right.
And, you know, I kind of had to shoulder that thing. And I'm like, oh, that happens?
Yeah.
Well, I'll try to be surprised when it happens in the game, you know?
Yeah, and that's an unfortunate side effect with
Yeah.
video gaming is the piracy and the people trying to be, you know, first.
Yeah,
Things
everybody
like
wants
that.
to be
No.
first.
Yeah.
But the one of the people on the team actually said the Friday before the launch, you know, when we were really hot and heavy with watching for leaks, and Kmart had already accidentally sold it early, and that created, you know, an extra multiplier of problems. But one of the guys on one of the conference calls said, well, look at it this way. He said on Friday, he said, there's only 2 more work days before Monday. And that's kind of what it was. Like I don't, even when I was at E3 and writing for various different outlets, I was not aware of the 24-hour work cycle quite as much as the week before Modern 3 and Elite launched. It was unbelievable. I did pull one day that was a 22-hour day.
Oh, good
And,
Lord.
and I'm not essential personnel. You know, like I'm not the guy that people come to for answers. I'm one of the people that helps execute and get some information, but I'm not like yes, no, you know, I don't have approval power on anything. I'm just there to like help. And
Sure.
even just helping, I was up for 22 hours at one point.
That's
So.
unbelievable. Well, I assure you, every person that purchased it appreciates everything you guys do over there.
I don't know if that's true, but I thank you for saying it. I'm glad that most people do.
Right. Now, and see, you're in a unique situation where you are going to have the people that are upset coming at you.
Yes.
My actual day job is dealing with a bunch of negativity all day as well. You know, every so often you have to just step back and realize that you're only dealing with a small portion of the actual player base out there. There are hundreds of thousands, millions of people that really, really enjoy the game. So
That is difficult to get a perspective on sometimes. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, I always think about American history. Nixon used to say that, you know, the silent majority supported him and that the people that were criticizing him were a small number of people. And, you
Right.
know, I don't really agree with him on that one. I think a lot of people were very unhappy with what he was doing. But I always try to keep that in mind. I'm like, are the people that I'm talking to who are rabidly angry, are they simply more vocal than the people who are blissfully happy?
Yes.
And you know, more and more people who are happy have started to come forward and say, "Hey, I really like this game. Thanks. You know, props to the team or whatever." And you know, and I do pass those things along. I had somebody write me a really heartfelt email, and it was so honest and earnest that I was like, I sent it on, and I was like, please make sure the team sees this because I'm sure they're getting beat up by you know the people who are unhappy with the handful of things that aren't working the way that they want them to work, or that they simply disagree with some of the design decisions. But yeah, I have had a hard time accepting that I am dealing with a fringe most of the
Right.
time. And especially if you try to if you put a lot of yourself into your work, it's been very hard not to take some of it personally. I've
Yeah.
found that top shelf tequila helps dramatically, but also, you know, just my wife has been very good about saying, you know what, they're angry, they have a reason, they care, and that's what it was. People don't get angry about stuff they don't care about.
Right.
You know, like some of it is like they have unrealistic expectations or they think that a game should do more than it does, but the only reason that they have expectations is because they played a game earlier that made them feel something that nothing else in their lives had made them feel. I mean, that's why we're all gamers, right?
Absolutely.
Like it's because of the emotional reaction that that you get when you play games, however you play them, whatever you play them on, and whoever you play them with. You do it because you feel something. So if any part of that feeling seems to be jeopardized by lag in a multiplayer game or a single player campaign that simply doesn't prolong the magic as long as they had hoped it would,
Or
you know,
Last Stand.
or Last Stand, yeah, or Second Chance, let's
Right.
say.
Right.
then that becomes a huge threat to everything that you love, and it's real easy to overreact. But yeah, you have to be patient, and you have to look at what's the core that they're really talking about. I know why they're upset, because that feeling has been threatened 9 times out of 10. But then what exactly is the concern about the game? Can I strip away the layers of sarcasm and sometimes just baiting, like
Right.
people, they do love to bait when you're the guy that they know, hey, you're Activision? I have a question for you, Activision. I'm like, oh, look at my birth certificate. Look at my driver's license, man. It still says Dan Amrich there, but all right, let's get to what you want to talk about, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, um, uh, speaking of the atmosphere that's at Activision, and I know you deal with negativity, most of your day probably.
Yeah, unfortunately I do.
When an expected hit doesn't do well, what's the atmosphere like there? I mean, do people talk about it, or is it better just
Yeah.
to move on?
No, it's more sadness because let's name names. Take a game like Blur. I felt really strongly about Blur. Blur is a game that I felt was like made for me. Unfortunately, it looks like it was only made for me. Uh, but that kind of arcade racer with real cars. Oh my god, that was like if I had written a wish list of games I wished Activision would make, Blur would have been one of those games. Not only did the game not sell, but they wound up closing the studio.
Yeah.
I mean, oh my god, I can't think of a worse ending to that story.
Hmm.
So I had been talking with the guys on the Blur team, and they knew that I was not only doing my job as like the social rep guy, but also, you know as a fan. And I felt really bad. And I went over and I sort of, when things started to go sour, I tried to just sort of offer my condolences and let them know what I was hearing from the community and let them know that there were some people out there that were still pulling hard for it. And, they were sad, because they had put so much of their lives, games take on average 18 to 2 months, 18,
Sure.
18 months to 2 years to come out. And there are plans all along the way, the production team, the development team, there's many steps. So there's many hands on every one of those games. So when a game underperforms, obviously it's easy to celebrate when you have something like Call of Duty, which is consistently successful and against all odds is more and more successful every year. I have no idea how long that's going to last, but I'm certainly savoring the moment, this week. But yeah, when games like Singularity or Blur or even, other games, when they underperform or when they just don't sell the way that people had, there's not a lot of smack talk. You just sort of have to accept that's what the market says they want or that's what the market says they don't want. We hope that the people who got the game enjoyed playing it. We wish more people would have done that. But other than occasionally remembering, yeah, I know that guy. He's the guy that said that in that review.
Right.
Names are often remembered for reviews. I had walked into meetings when I was a member of the press where the developer, I said, hi, I'm from GamePro. He goes, oh, yeah, you gave my last game a blankety blank. And it
Yeah.
wasn't me, but I said, I'm sorry about that. Like, what do
Right.
I do? But,
Right. Well, you
um,
can't say anything there, and I expect to run into those situations, being quote unquote media myself. Now,
yeah,
that actually is a great segue to my next question. Having been on the other side, that being journalism, do
yeah.
you think you can look at the interior workings of Activision in a different light? And
Oh,
do
yeah.
do other members of the team come by and ask your journalistic view on games or ideas that they have?
Absolutely. That's part of my benefit is when I got set up here, I was told you're going to be independent. My boss is actually a senior VP at the company, and I've known her for years because she was at the front lines of PR and she's worked her way up. And so, like I remember covering games like Interstate 76 and Paparazzi in the mid 90s, these PC games, and she was there at the launch events and, like she would come on demos and stuff. So when I got set up, we already had a working relationship. She knew my journalistic background. That's one of the reasons that made me a good candidate for the job. But they said, we don't want you to not be you. Like, you need to be Dan Amrich and you need to be who you have been. And I'm like, so are you basically hiring me to be an editor that covers Activision on a fan site that Activision technically owns? And they're like, well, kind of, yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, I do get pulled in as an ex media guy. What would you say if we did this, or we're thinking of doing this in the press release? Would or we want to use this phrase? Does this phrase mean something different to gamers than what we think it's going to do? There's a lot of my job in the last 2 years that's been sort of double checking the wording of things so that gamers don't get angry.
Sure.
And sometimes we'll play a game called What's the Headline? Where
Okay.
If I read a statement that they want to put out, I say, okay, here's your headline. Here's the negative headline that you absolutely do not want Kotaku to write, but they probably will.
Right.
Like I am used for that skill of still thinking like an editor. When I was interviewing, one of the people that interviewed me said, "Do you have any questions?" And at this point, I was pretty far along in the interview process, but I was aware I was not going to be the person that I've always been. I've always identified myself as a writer,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm a games editor, and that's what I do. And so to simply not be media anymore was a huge change for me. So he said, "Do you have any questions?" I said, "Yeah. How exactly do you sell out?" And he looked at me and he said, I'm not sure I understand. I said, well, let's call it what it is. You guys are looking for some of my credibility, what little cred that I have as a journalist, and people may recognize my name from working in the industry for a while. I'm not famous, but I have a certain amount of stock in the game community. And I'm basically selling that to go to work for one of the big companies that I used to report on. And they're like, no, you can't sell out. That's the opposite of what we need. If you're not authentic, this doesn't work. And I thought, well, that was the right thing to say, but I don't know if they're telling me the truth.
Right.
And amazingly, they told me the truth. I only report to the senior VP. It's the only person I have to answer to. I help everybody else, but I'm allowed to do what I want to do. And they assume that because I'm constantly in touch with the community, I can give them community feedback at any point, and I do. But then I also still sort of think like a journalist. They're like, that helps us. If you continue to think, like, if you were reviewing this game, what would you give it? And can you take a look at this and tell us what you think? And yeah, I still do a lot of those things. So I feel more like a consultant. A lot of people, when they leave the media, they go into consultancy, and Guy is doing that very, very well right now. That's still part of... It's still part of my personality and still part of my skill set, even though it's no longer in my title. I guess that's the best way to look at it.
That's a hell of an idea Activision had, bringing you on board, and it's worked out from my point of view.
It has. I hate Los Angeles. I'm sorry to anybody who lives in Los Angeles. I am not compatible with your city.
Where are you from?
I grew up on the East Coast. I say outside of Philadelphia, which means Trenton, New Jersey. Okay. And I lived in New York City for about 3 years when I was working at the guitar magazines and at Flux. And then I moved out to San Francisco, and I lived there for 13 years. So I love New York. I love San Francisco. I just can't seem to find my happiness with LA. And thankfully, I have some other people who I grew up with who now also live in LA. And they're like, you don't even have to explain. I know exactly what you're talking about, and I will help you through this. And every once in a while, they find little things that help me accept my reality. So the job is great. My wife is happy down here. Obviously, I feel like Activision values what I do. I have the right amount of editorial freedom, as I keep saying. I really do act like an editor, like I'm editor-in-chief of my blog, and nobody tells me what to say. And I get enough inside info that I feel, confident that I can talk to the audience. I just don't like this town.
Yeah. No, I hear you. Well, I mean, I'm a country boy. I live in Maine. There's more people in LA than there is in my entire state.
Well,
okay?
But there's more cows in Maine than there are people in LA. So
that's true. That
friend of mine grew up on a dairy farm. I love in Benton.
Yeah.
So beautiful, just total farm country. I got up there. I'm like, wow, you guys were not kidding. You live on a farm with a capital F.
You know what's funny though is Benton is one of the busier areas in the state. It's right outside one of the quote unquote cities. Okay.
That's hilarious to me.
Oh yeah, well, it's hilarious to me too, but there's nothing up here, and that's the problem.
That's not true. My musical cohort Jude Kelly from Palette Swap Ninja is from Maine, and his parents still live up in Maine, and he still goes up to Maine very often. So
yeah,
good things come out of Maine.
Let's hope that the trend continues then.
Yeah.
Now we've talked a lot about your background, but I'm interested now in what you do with your free time. Obviously, you play some Call of Duty, but are first-person shooters your favorite genre?
What free time are you talking?
Your alleged free time.
Yeah, part of the problem is that I do kind of take my work home with me. I find myself, I'll watch TV with one eye, and then I'll keep the other lazy eye on Twitter, and I'll be answering on a laptop while I'm on my couch, and I'm only like half tuned in to the reality shows that we're watching and stuff. When I have time to game on my own, I do like shooters. I like single-player stuff. I'm not a big fan of epic RPGs. I'll make the exception for World of Warcraft, but I've never had the attention span for giant RPGs. The last big RPG I played was probably Fallout 3.
Uh-huh.
I know Skyrim is out this week. I love what the work that the Bethesda guys do. I've met several members of the team. They're all incredibly talented. Todd Howard and I have chatted several times when I was at OXM. I ran into him at E3 last year. I really like what they do. I just don't have the wherewithal. I grew up on Twitch games in the arcade. I grew up playing Tempest and Robotron 2084.
You're
And
speaking
so
my language.
yeah, so I'm much more of an action gamer, a Twitch gamer. Right now, my to-play list, I feel obligated to play through the single-player campaign of most of the games that Activision puts out. Granted, I don't always make it through all the Cabela's games, but I am looking forward to playing the new Shadows of Katmai, the survival game, the action survival. It looks interesting, and you can play it with the light gun with the Top Shot Elite, so I'll give that a shot. But let's see, I have BioShock 2 that I still really need to play. I bought Gears of War 3, got about 20 minutes into it, and then had to stop.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm looking forward to doing that over Thanksgiving. I've got new GoldenEye, again, like I feel obligated. I like Bond. I'm not a huge Bond fan, but I want to play through that. Pinball FX 2 has been taking up a lot of my time. I'm in some terrible rivalries with friends, and they're terrible because I'm not winning.
Right.
I do like, I still like to play Rock Band and Guitar Hero, only in a social setting though now, like only if my wife feels like playing. I just don't want to play those games single player right now.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, what else do I have? Well, I am playing Rocksmith. I'll do that single player.
Yes.
Ubisoft, because again, that just matches my personal passions. Oh, you're a huge guitar nerd and you're a huge game nerd. My God, we have the perfect game.
Right.
And Dance Central 2. I promised my wife I'd play some more Dance Central 2. I love harmonics up, down, and sideways. There was a rumor that went around that Activision was going to buy harmonics, and I was like, oh please be a true rumor, and it wasn't. But I love what they do. I think that their core, as a musician, I think their core tenet for why they make games, their core mission statement, to bring the joy of music, of performance and absorbing music to non-musicians, to people that don't have the technical facility to actually pick up a real guitar and play. Right. That's what Guitar Hero came out of, and that's what Dance Central is based on, and they've done so many things like that. I think that is the single most noble gaming goal on the planet. Like they use games because they're the best medium to do it. They didn't start out to be a game developer. Yeah. So little known fact, I actually did apply to be their community manager before I came to Activision.
No kidding.
And they didn't answer my my application. I don't think they ever saw my my resume, actually.
It got lost in the mail, I assure you.
I was ready to move to Boston. I was like, and honestly, with the changes that the company has gone through, I may no longer have been working there anyway. They had to cut back significantly, but I have nothing but absolute love for them. So I'll generally play any harmonics game. I loved Frequency and Amplitude too. I have them, and I'm hoping that one day I'll get Alex Rogopoulos to sign them for me.
Yeah.
So yeah, in my copious free gaming time, I do stick to shooters and actiony games. I used to be the guy who was the weird game reviewer at GamePro. Anything that was like strange and Japanese that shouldn't have come over, like Incredible Crisis, weird games like that, or music games, Parappa stuff. I was generally on those because they're like, you like weird games. Like it was actually a compliment that we would go to a demo, and when we get out of the demo, the other editors go, "That was totally a Dan game." And so, I'll play anything, but I do tend to focus on shooters and action games.
Sure. I'm the same way. And what's funny is I'm starting to realize I'm suffering from kind of the same issue that you have, much more diminished, I think, though, is that as you get into this industry, you understand it's not just playing games all the time.
Oh, so, it's very little of it is playing games.
That's exactly it. Well, I'll get a game in here. You need to review this. Oh, this is a great game. I have to finish it to do the review. I'm going to go back and play this. No, you're not. Here's another game. We need this reviewed now as well. Yeah. And it's the pile of shame just builds and builds and builds.
Your gaming habits have to change because you get one lap through.
Right.
And a lot of times, when I was reviewing at OXM, we had debug kit hardware, and they would send us the games early and we would play it, and then by the time that we were, the issue is done, the game is out. I don't necessarily have time to go back and play it on my retail account. So there's no sort of public record. I don't get any of the gamer score
right
for doing it, but I've played through the whole game, And I'm glad to have had the experience because that's what you should be focusing on is did I enjoy the experience? But at the same
Right.
time, I want some public credit for that.
Yeah,
And also I'd
absolutely.
like to go back and do it again, but you can't do it. So
Right, right. Care
um,
to share what your gamer score is?
my gamer score is a lowly about I think I just hit 35,000.
Oh, excellent.
No, not really. I was trying to average 10,000 a year. And
Yep.
I'm not a completist, so I won't, I don't go around and get all the packages in GTA, and I don't get all the intel in Modern Warfare. Although I look for it, I never get it. But I'm not
Right,
the kind
right.
of player that I will go back and like if I miss an achievement, like I just barely missed an achievement in Black Ops. When you had to take out 6 tanks with 6 rockets.
Yep.
I used 7, and I
Uh,
knew that I was like, oh no, I accidentally, I shot like right in front of me accidentally, and I was doing that level specifically to get that goal. And then I never went back to do it again, and that's a constant bother to me is that I
yeah.
never got to do that. I still tell myself I am actively playing 2005's Need for Speed Most Wanted. I have 3 more guys to take off of the list, and those last 3 guys are worth about 600 gamer score
Oh, wow.
because it was a launch game and nobody had really like the balance for how to
Right.
budget out the things.
Sure.
So yeah, I still have a lot of games that I have not gotten to go back and play. I think I did the Need for Speed Most Wanted review on for OXM. Maybe I didn't. Maybe that was just the one that I was waiting for. But yeah, I mean the list of games that I would like to go back and spend more time with, whether it's to play again or to finish playing through single player, is immense. And of course, now that I'm involved with Activision and my wife is playing
Right.
Call of Duty, if she says, "Hey, let's play some Modern Warfare tonight, or let's play some Black Ops tonight," I will spend 2 or 3 hours in multiplayer, happy as a clam that my wife is there shooting people next to me. But at the same time, that does cut into I never got a chance to play BioShock 2, and I bought it and everything. Like it's super weird to buy a game and then never actually play it.
Right. I've
So
done that. I've done that. And it's depressing is what it is when you look back
it
a year and a half and say, "Oh, geez, the packaging's not even off that."
And obviously, like, when people find out that, oh, you review video games? Oh, so you just play video games all day, right? No, it's so not that. To make it worse, I have a 360 on my desk here that like the company owns, and I bring in my PS3 whenever I need it.
Yep.
But it's there, and every day I could play games, but I don't have the time.
Exactly.
So it's like being on a diet in a candy store. Like I look at it and I
Great
go,
analogy.
that's the 360 that nobody is going to bust me if I just turn around and start playing games. My thing is that I at least want to be playing Activision games. If I'm on the clock and I have some spare time on the clock, then I'm going to go ahead and play through one of the single player games. Like I'll go through GoldenEye or something like that.
Sure, that's reasonable.
Other people in the office, they play games from other publishers. I walked by one guy today. He was playing Skyrim. Yesterday, somebody was playing Arkham City. I mean, there's a healthy percent. Everybody here is a gamer,
Yeah.
so nobody's going to look at you funny for playing games at your desk. But at the same time, who has the time to play games at their desk? It's always like, yeah, I've got like an hour before my next meeting. I'm just wanted to scratch the itch. You'll hear a lot of people, research.
Right.
But yeah, occupational hazard.
Yeah,
just
yeah.
not as bad as the spoiler one.
Well, now you turned 40 this year. Did you freak
Thanks
out, or
for
did
bringing
you
that up.
just? Okay, I think this answers the question.
No, I freaked out at 30.
I turned 30 a couple of months ago.
I had a hard time with 30. I was suddenly aware of everything that I had intended to do in my 20s that I didn't do. So I did them. Like when I turned 30, I said, that's it. This is the year I'm going to do all of those things, or at least attempt. Playing a lot of Tony Hawk, I wanted to learn how to skateboard.
Yeah.
So I went on Craigslist when it was very young, and I said, I can teach you how to juggle if you teach me how to skateboard. Found a 17-year-old kid in my neighborhood. He was awesome. He was a patient teacher. He was wasting his time, and he's an excellent juggler now.
Awesome. That's a cool story.
I was not able to learn how to skateboard. I fell and I almost broke my wrist, and I went, that's it. It's not worth it. I can't play guitar, I can't play games, and I
Yeah.
can't type if I can't use my hands. And I just went, you know what? Controller's fine. When I was 30, I said I wanted to learn how to play drums. I started taking drum lessons. I'm now a bad drummer. And actually, I sold my real drum kit to get the Ion Rock Band kit, And
Oh
then I
yeah.
got the MIDI brain that you can plug into it so that it's a real electronic drum kit. So I am very happy that I have this hybrid of real musical instrument and game musical instrument. And the other thing that I really wanted to do when I turned 30 was I've always wanted to be on a game show. I grew up watching game shows. I'm a
No
trivia
kidding.
nerd, and a friend of mine had a friend who had won on Rock and Roll Jeopardy. So I was able to get in touch with the casting directors and
Wow.
find out when the next auditions were. And I was still up in San Francisco. I went down to LA. I went to Culver City. I went to the Jeopardy set. I sat there in the audience and took the exam. I passed the exam for Rock and Roll Jeopardy, not real Jeopardy. This is before Jeff Probst did Survivor, he did Rock and Roll Jeopardy on VH1, and I passed the test, and that was what I wanted to do. I didn't get on the show, although I did. I mean, only like a third of the people in that were there to take the exam made it through. I was super proud. I was like, just wanted to prove to myself that I could be on a game show if they wanted me.
That's
Excellent.
awesome.
So yeah, at 40, I was like, oh, it's Wednesday.
Right.
It didn't really bother me. I have one life project that I want to get done before the end of the year, and that's it. And after that, I'm just like, you know what? I'm okay with it. I thought I would freak out at 40, and I didn't.
Good.
But I freaked out hard at 30. We had my
Yeah.
13th birthday party when I turned 30.
Yeah.
Like, we played Atari at my 30th 13th birthday party.
That sounds similar to mine, actually.
Yeah.
That's really funny. Now, the final question I have for you before we get into some of the community questions is
Sure.
the reason we game is because of those monumental occasions when something amazing happens. We're pulled into this experience. It could be, a monster game of Call of Duty, a crazy story from Dungeons and Dragons or World of Warcraft, or even a play in Madden football. Do you have one story that sticks out above all of the others?
As like that, the
That-
one that made me into a gamer, or the one that I feel typifies my gaming experience?
That right, yeah, either or. I mean, what just that one feeling where you sat back and went, "Wow."
I don't know. I mean, I get that fairly often. I think one of the things that is very easy to lose sight of when you review games for a living is that you forget that they're supposed to be fun. I think if you shut yourself out from that feeling of wonder and that awe that you get when, oh my God, something awesome happens. When you work in the candy store, candies sometimes no longer becomes fun, right?
Right.
And there's a lot of game reviewers who I have met over the years who have suffered from that, where they're not having fun anymore and they don't know it. And they hate what they used to love just out of sheer proximity and overdosing on it. So I've been very careful to be very appreciative of those moments. As a result, it's kind of a cop-out answer. I don't have any one thing that's leaping to mind. I have a couple,
okay.
I have my all-time favorite games, and Interstate 76 by Activision is actually one that I have cited for years. Robotron 2084 still makes me sweat every time I play it. I am still scared every time I played Robotron 2084. It's that hard. To me, that's a transcendent experience. Like,
Yes.
I want a game that continually challenges me through my entire life. I appreciate that moment every time I play Robotron 2084. Every time I put my hands on those two joysticks, I go, this is the time I'm going to get my high score. Like, I am constantly aspirational with that game. So
That's awesome.
I generally feel amazement when I play games, even the mediocre games. I'm very good at going, you know what, but it did this well. And I see what they were going for this, and I appreciate that, and I really liked that moment. X-Men Destiny was one of those games. Got pretty bad reviews. I totally see what everybody else saw, but I also saw a couple things in there where I went, I didn't expect that to be that cool. Or that was really convenient, and I haven't seen other games do that. And, I'm not going to protest too loud because I'm the guy from Activision, right? I'm not going to tell, well, the reviewers are wrong. It's a great game.
Right.
But I am going to say, wow, that game still had some value to me, and I appreciate what it did.
Right.
So
It's funny you say that because I tout myself as a game reviewer who looks at games for what's good about them, not what's bad.
Right.
You can't avoid the bad things in games, but if you find the good things, it's all about having
be willing to celebrate them. Some games, their bad things overwhelm them, and you have to come out and say, problem A, problem B, problem C equals save your money.
Sure.
Don't support this. They need to be told.
Right.
But Eric Bratcher, who was the editor-in-chief over at Games Radar when I was there, he and I talked about our ideas about review, and he said, I don't think that games start as a 10 and go down. That's what a fan thinks.
Right.
A fan goes in expecting the greatest thing in the world and then is often disappointed. I don't go in as a cynic who says this game isn't worth the money and you have to prove yourself. He said, I go in, every game is a 5, and it works up or down from there. I have mediocre expectations for every game. This is a game. That non-judgmental acceptance of opening the box is the very first thing I work with. I'm playing a game that is now in my hands. And I thought that was an amazing way to look at it. He's like, I started a 5 and it goes up or down from there based on what it tells me. That kind of changed the way that I saw. And I had been reviewing games for 14 or 13 years at that point. But that gave me a completely new perspective. And I was like, God, I wish more people did that, because I think we're all guilty of saying, oh my God, Modern Warfare 3 is going to be the greatest game in the world, right? And then you play it, and it doesn't matter how good it is, you've come in with unrealistic expectations. Or worse, Modern Warfare 3 is going to suck. It's just going to be the same thing as last year. It's just new maps and a couple of new perks, and I hate it. And it's like, but you haven't even tried it. You don't know it. Surely it's not going to be as bad as you think it is if that's what you're going in with it. So, yeah, some moderate expectations at the beginning, and then being willing to be impressed or being reasonable about how you are critical. I think that's really the key to being a happy gamer, whether you review them for a living or not.
Exactly. I can't agree more. So now I've got a couple of questions here from some of our listeners, and because I'm reading their questions, they're actually going to win some prizes. So good for them. I know.
Do I have to get the answers right for them to get prizes?
No. They're not questions like that. They're questions for you. I mentioned.
No, I know, but I'm wondering if there are right answers to some of these things anyway.
I don't think so, based on what I'm looking at. I mean, maybe, but the first question is actually it's kind of a double question, because the second writer asked this as well. But Yili Bakali, I hope I'm saying his name right, and I hope I didn't butcher that. But he wants to know, how did you become what you are in the job you have? He loves video games and he wants to pursue a career into it. He wants to get some tips from a professional.
I think the single best thing that you can do is focus on your individual voice. And this covers whether you're thinking of going into community management or whether you're thinking of game journalism or editorial work. Anybody can review a game. Anybody can say a game is good. Anybody can say a game is bad. It's the telling that makes the difference. It's the style with which it's done. And that's not to say that you have to try to be somebody else or cop a certain style, but learning what your strengths are as a writer, writing a lot helps, whether you're published or not. Getting feedback on that, whether it's published professional feedback or not, is really good. But, a lot of people also say, I want to start a gaming blog. How do I do that? How do I make people come to my gaming blog? Do I have to do giveaways? I'm like, no, you have to give them something that they want to come back and read. And that is I'm not going to lie, that is a very difficult thing to do. I don't have a formula for it. I'm happy to say that my blog traffic has been rising, but I'm benefiting from my association with Activision. People are not just reading it because, it's what Dan Amrich says. They're reading it because I'm that guy at Activision. If I were to leave Activision and I would go back to my standard blog, there'd be a fraction of those people. But there is that fraction of people that believe that what I have to say is interesting and worth reading. So the trick is to find out what you believe would set you apart. Not necessarily a gimmick, but just, what do you do better than other people? What is your way of expressing yourself that you feel is more valuable? If they can get it from IGN and they can get it from GameSpot, why would they go to your blog or your review outlet or your media place instead, or in addition to? What do you have that's worth saying? And that's a really tricky part. That's a macro look at the question. The question may have been, how do I physically approach an editor and tell them that I want to write about games for a living? Right. In which case, call them up, have some samples in hand, and say, this is what I can do. Are you looking for anybody that can cover this for you? You will get more luck if you go on a local level or on an independent blog level than if you suddenly go to a national publication and say, dude, I'm your guy. If you can find an independent blog that's looking for writers, specifically, there's a lot of people out there saying, hey, we've got a brand new site. We're looking for writers. We can't pay you, but we want, interesting voices on staff.
Right.
That's somebody who's trying to make their career the same way that you are. You should get together with them. You should find somebody with a sympathetic voice that's doing a project that you respect and that you like them, and that you go in with a fair amount of humility and say, I like what you're doing here. I would like to be considered to be one of your writers. And that's going to give you the kind of clips and the kind of published, even if it's, for free, even if it's just on the internet, quote unquote, that's going to give you the seasoning as a writer to be able to say, okay, now I see what I'm doing well. I'm proud of this. I'm not as proud of this. I see how I could have done this better, blah, blah, blah. And then when you do go to approach a larger outlet, you have a body of work that speaks for you. So those things do go hand in hand. Start with a smaller outlet and have reasonable expectations about what you're going to be able to reach. And then the only thing that's going to make you interesting to that outlet and any outlets other than that is your unique voice, your work ethic, how you do what you do.
Right.
So
sage advice.
It's a lot to consider. Hopefully I didn't ramble too much.
No, not at all.
I believe that.
And that actually helps myself as well.
Hearing
it from you, it puts things in perspective for me, and hopefully we helped Ely there. Now, an actual personal friend of mine who is currently a community manager for a website that I used to write for wrote in with some questions. Okay,
right.
His first question is, do you have? His name is Tech Geek, and I'm sure.
Oh, I know Tech Geek.
Yes. Okay.
Tech Geek actually went to XP 2011 because he was one of the people that won my contest when I gave away tickets. So I got to meet Tech Geek in person.
Yes, and now that you mentioned COD XP, let's start with that question. He asks, with COD XP 2011 being a huge success and a lot of fun, can we expect XP events to take place in the coming years?
I don't know. I would like to think that they would, and it certainly looked to me like they were trying to establish something that could be an annual event. The fact that when I said, hey, we're using #CODXP as the hashtag on Twitter, and they said, no, it's XP 2011, the fact that they wanted to insert the year suggests that they're thinking annually.
Gotcha.
I don't have any information. I actually assumed that it would be annual. And I said to somebody, and I'm like, well, next year. They're like, well, we'll see about next year. I'm like, oh, okay. And it wasn't one of those like, hey, don't tell anybody. It was kind of like, no, we're going to look at the data and find out whether that was something that we want to do again.
Sure.
Because it was very expensive to throw that, and it was a whole lot of effort by a whole lot of people.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I heard it was fantastic though. I have some friends, some Machinima folks, and Tech Geek himself that went out and had just a blast.
I hope that everybody that went enjoyed it. Again, there was a lot of negativity online. Oh, it's just Activision trying to make more money, blah, blah, blah. The food was pretty lousy. I'll go right out and say that. Oh, the food was terrible. But when it came time to like actually giving the fans some love and, the free concerts and the hands-on time and the panels, I think that in a lot of ways, XP really did deliver. And I think the people who were there are happy to have said that they were there. And, of course, everybody got a free copy of Hardened Edition, which certainly makes it a little bit easier.
It certainly does.
But at the same time, I hope that they do another one, but I actually do not have any clarity on whether they're doing one or not next year.
Okay.
Here's hoping.
Okay. And Tech Geek also wants to know, do you have any advice for someone trying to get into the video game industry if programming and blogging isn't their forte?
Tech Geek has pointed out something very smart. If you really want to get into the game industry, then you want to learn how to make games.
Right.
The reason I went the path that I did is because I didn't know how to make games. I took computer science in college. The only thing it lets me do now is appreciate binary jokes on T-shirts. I saw one yesterday, laughed my ass off. 11 cheers for binary. And I just died at that, and my wife just shook her head because she took the same class, so she gets the joke.
Right.
But, one thing that I've noticed that people in the video game industry are concerned about is when people from the video game media say that they're part of the industry. Yeah, you don't make games. If you talk about games, you are part of the media industry. You are not part of the video games. You're part of the media that covers the video games industry because you don't do what they do. And if you could, you would. And, some people got pretty angry about that. And I realized that was a totally valid thing to get angry about. I don't know what it's like to debug code. I am, even as a reviewer, I took it upon myself to try to learn how to program games. As a music reviewer, everybody that I ever spoke to who was a music reviewer at the Guitar Magazine, they were all guitarists. They had all created music on their own.
Sure.
Most of the film critics that I've ever met, they have also taken film classes. They went to film school. They have created their own independent films. They know what it's like. They know what they're judging from personal experience. How many video game reviewers have actually written a video game?
That's a good point.
Done anything. We allow people in with no expertise, and yet all they have to have done is saved the princess a lot, and that makes them an expert on things like weapon balance and level flow and design and things that they probably don't have any personal experience with. So I always encourage people to go out there and do something. You can write your own text adventure game. You really can. The tools are free. There's a burgeoning community out there. I challenge everybody to write like a game with 2 rooms. Build 2 rooms and make a key that you have to pick up and insert into the door that connects the 2 rooms. That will take you all weekend.
Oh, no doubt.
But it will give you an appreciation for what it's like to actually build something from nothing. And that's what game developers do. So if you have the art skills, you can be part of the art team, but you still need to have some technical knowledge. And yeah, if you're a programmer, then you're speaking the language, right? It's like, right. I'm a musician, but I don't read music. I still feel functionally illiterate. I don't like to jam with people because I'm just going to show them how little I know, you know?
Yeah.
Same with video games. So if you don't program and you don't blog, how can you get involved? Can you draw? I mean, like my brother-in-law is actually a 3D artist, and he's not using that as a skill now, but he did work for a game developer. And, he was always, as long as you can keep up with the tools, you can usually find somebody who needs even temporary work from a talented artist to help them with textures or models or something like that. It is kind of weird. I guess you have to figure out, my question to Tech Geek would be, what else do you want to do if not programming and blogging? If those are not good, what are you good at? And then what is your expertise? How is that applicable to the video game world? I mean, there's a lot of people here, let's just bring up Bobby Kotick at this point. Bobby is not a programmer, right? He used to be. He used to be a game developer.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't know that he was hashing code necessarily, but he was a developer, and he worked on, oh God, what was it? It was some like business suite in like the late 80s.
No kidding.
And it was how his developer was treated. He wasn't happy with the way that the publisher that they had signed with treated his developer. And that's when he said, you know what, when I get to be a publisher, I'm going to treat people differently. I'm going to do things. And, famous last words, right? But, Bobby loves video games. I know he's gotten some crap in the last couple of years for not playing video games, which was this ridiculous urban legend that came out of a Forbes article. But, but he doesn't have the skill to build them, but he still loves them, and what his expertise was business. So you have a lot of, there are people here who are here doing the business side of Activision, but they are like first in line when we get a chance to play the games ourselves, and when we have like internal parties and they're wearing gaming t-shirts to work. I mean, you can love games, and just games is so big now. And, the making and publishing and shipping of games, there's got to be some aspect of that where your natural talents, polished, can be put to good use. So don't sweat it if you're not like, I can't actually write code and the journalism side is so busy that there's no way I'd ever get in. There's a million other things that you can do. It's just if you can find the right opportunities for your skill set.
Sure. Excellent. Well, I think that's all I have for questions. So
excellent. I'll go into my questions for you.
Okay, fantastic.
No, I don't know. Sorry.
I assumed as much. But Dan, I do want to say thank you for taking the time out. It has been a unique pleasure to speak with you.
I hope I didn't put anybody to sleep. That's all. I appreciate that you cared enough to call and ask me for the interview.
Of course.
Again, I like being available. To me, this is the most fun part of what I get to do. Because I do like talking to the community. I do like hearing from people what they care about. And I'm always happy to talk about myself. That's never a problem. But yeah, I mean, like it's I think at the end of the day, I have a difficult job on some days, but more often I have a cool job, and I'm happy to share that with anybody who wants to know about it.
Well, there you have it, folks. That was the interview with Dan Amrich. It was very interesting. I got like another 20 or 30 minutes of talk time with him. Just he and I shooting the breeze. Actually, after the interview, and he's really a cool guy. So another huge thank you goes out to One of Swords. Make sure you check out his website, oneofswords.com. He updates on everything Activision Modern Warfare 3 type stuff, and he does giveaways, giveaways that put my giveaways to shame. So make sure you go check that out. Follow him on Twitter at One of Swords. Okay. Also, to the people who wrote in with questions, it's Yili Bakali and my boy Tech Geek. Make sure you provide me with your mailing address. I'm going to go ahead and get a couple of prizes out to you guys for writing in. And to finish off the podcast, the hot topic this week, games of the year. We have seen an influx of amazing games this year, unlike anything we've ever seen. Okay, and this is, November of 2011. The same thing was said about 2010. The same thing was said about 2009. Okay, so as we carry on every year, year after year, it's growing in popularity, in the type of work that's getting put out, and the expectations of players, developers, and reviewers like myself, to the point where it might even be unrealistic expectations. I'm not quite sure there. Okay, what I want to know from you is, what do you think your game of the year is, and why? Okay, now, I've got a toss-up. I mean, we've got Batman Arkham City. We've got L.A. Noire that came out that really revolutionized the way you look at a game. You've got things like Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, which is part of a series at this point. You've got Skyrim, which has done something that at least I haven't been able to find that's ever been done in the history of video games before, both in terms of scale, in terms of AI and things like that. Okay, you've got other games, and I'm talking about Tropico 4 that stepped in and said, you want a sandbox type, real-time strategy city building game? Do that. I mean, I've put more time into Tropico 4 than I put into Batman or Modern Warfare 3. And you've got the Modern Warfare 3 versus Battlefield 3 argument that is inherent year in and year out. So I want to hear from you. Email me, xbox360solocast@gmail.com. In the description field, I want you to put Game of the Year. Explain to me why your game is Game of the Year, explain to me your Game of the Year, and then why that game is Game of the Year. And I don't mean you have to knock down other games, because a game isn't good because another game sucks, okay? This game is good because a game is good. So let's hear some positive emails, and I'll read somebody's on air next week, or, based on the rate I've been going, next month, and I will send out some more prizes to some of you lucky listeners. Thanks again for tuning in to the Xbox 360 Solocast. This is Smitty Smith. Make sure you subscribe on iTunes. Make sure you subscribe on the Zune Marketplace. And go ahead and leave me a rating. I do read the ratings, the good ones as well as the bad. And I tell you, a bad one is just as good as a good one, because it tells me what I need to do to get better. Thanks for tuning in again, guys. Have a good week.